And welcome back to your Drunk Uncle Sports Podcast. I am your host, Anwar Richardson, for a special edition with Catch. What did we name you? Did we name you Uncle Phil? Was the last name that? Because it's been like a couple of years since you've been on the podcast, and I can't. Did we settle on Uncle Phil?
I think we did settle on Uncle Phil, although I was always really partial to Riddick Bowe's manager.
Yes.
Who I can only see in my head. I can never. Who?
Rock Newman was his name.
Oh yeah, I like that one.
So, Uncle Rock Newman is here. Oh, that is going to be so freaking awesome. Listen, make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe channel. We've got a little bit of a couple of things going on. Look, this is really the Malik Muhammad broadcast, reaction, all that. Like, it's all going to be about Malik Muhammad at this moment. Super chat that's here. Drunk Uncle on for the Malik Muhammad commitment. Absolutely. Free Ajomo or free Moro. Absolutely, Brandon. Catch. It is free Moro Ajomo Day. It is Malik Muhammad Day. I just want to kind of started with some, maybe just give you some general thoughts as we get ready for this commitment. Catch, it almost feels like we're doing one of these like these crazy live shows when they're literally like waiting for something to happen, which I guess we technically are. But give me your general thoughts going into this thing.
Well, just like you were saying, we would be having a Drunk Uncle show on the Orange Blood Texas Football Channel at this time. Malik Muhammad this week decided during the Drunk Uncle time slot that he would make his announcement. So we're here. We've got Malik Muhammad like covered whenever that announcement is ready to go. I think the thing that stands out to me, Anwar, is that I literally did an article on Sunday, my 10 thoughts from the weekend, where I looked at the elite of the elite talent that Texas has brought in over the course of the last 4 recruiting windows. After attrition and transfers, Texas has 10 kind of elite of the elite talents, if you will, on its roster, but only one of them are defense. So we know they can recruit the offensive line. We know that they can get quarterbacks. We know that they're checking all the boxes on the offensive side of the ball. They need talent like they're getting on the offensive side of the talent. And this is where Muhammad, should he choose to Texas, sorry, I got distracted for a second. I was wondering, I got a notification that Jonte Cook was going live. And for a moment, I was like, oh, what's going on? I love that dude. He knows when to go on like nobody else's business. But the bottom line is we're talking about a kid from a talent standpoint. That is exactly what this Texas program under Steve Sarkisian needs more of. There will be people who will say, get a linebacker. There'll be people who will say, get an edge rusher. Yes, and more yeses. But you never turn back a guy that can be a number 1 cornerback on a championship team. So as Malik Muhammad prepares to make his announcement, that's kind of what's on the line for the Longhorns. He's a guy that can come in and I think be legit. When the guys say, I'm here for my next 3 or 4 years, or before I take my talents to Malik Muhammad is the kind of guy that can legitimately say, I'm going to a school for 3 years. That's the plan before I move on. And I don't think it's fodder.
Yeah, it is. So a couple of things. Yes, Rob is a bum. He has reached out to all our sponsors to try to get us canceled. So Rob is a bum. All you guys thought he was a nice old man. He's not that nice. Eric, you can't do the super chat today. Eric, we'll make it up to you another time. Eric, you've been so good in the super chat. Make sure you can ask us anything today. We know you're good for it because Eric, you'll just drop 20 on us, like you just make it rain on us, like however you want, Eric. So because you're so loyal, we'll definitely do that. Vodka and Red Bull is in the cup. You guys keep asking because you want to be awake to make all the bad decisions in your life, and so that's what's in this cup at this moment. And Catch, I'm kind of curious because, and so I'm going to defer to Catch here. We were trying to come up with different analogies as far as what we want to do this show. And I told Ketch, I'm going to be Tommy Frazier. And then Ketch didn't really like that because I said, we're going to run the the option, and I'll be Tommy Frazier. And he didn't like being Lawrence Phillips in this equation. So
for a number of reasons.
For fair reasons, by the way. Extremely fair reasons. None of which is dragging a woman down the stairs.
A million reasons.
Correct. So, but it's recruiting. It's what Ketch does. It's his wheelhouse. And, so what we'll be doing is we'll be waiting for that commitment to come. Blake is monitoring this thing. And, at the moment we start feeling like it's starting to get close to it, we can't show someone else's live feed because that's not going to be good. But we'll do the best that we can to make sure we break away so everyone can kind of see it. But we'll have our instant reaction in here. So Ketch, it's very interesting because you talk about Malik and him being one of the top 10 of the elite in this state, in this class. I'm kind of Ketch, where is he ranking in your LSR? And when you start talking about 3 to 4 years, I will ask, when you start looking at the star rankings and you start getting into where he's ranked and how many of those guys go pro, I'm kind of curious as to, give me where he is in your LSR, and from the rankings perspective, how likely is he to be an NFL guy?
I have him as the number 5 player in the state of Texas. I mean, I think he is in 5-star consideration. I think one of the things that would excite you if you're a Texas football fan is that the defensive back position, the wide receiver position is super hit and miss. I am so afraid to have you ask that question to me the next time an in-state receiver commits. Let's say Texas gets a receiver from Lufkin sometime soon by the name of Jalen Hill. You'll ask me, by the way, Todd, you guys can't tell me, check my DMs. And when I'm talking in the middle of a sentence, it distracts me. Wide receivers in the state of Texas, I promise, Todd. Now you have me curious. DBs inside the state of Texas, especially the really good DBs, hit at an exceptionally high number of times. So when you look at he's probably a borderline 5-star guy who I think is going to end up being like a top 30, top 40 type prospect. Those guys are 50-50 propositions, which at that point, the only things that you're worried about with a talent like that is injuries, grades, all the big 4 off the field problems, domestic stuff. This kid has none of that I'm aware of. I'm just telling you that you only start worrying about the things that trip kids up at that point that aren't talent related. Based on this guy's talent, if everything goes the way it should, this is a guy that will be playing on Sundays. Whenever guys with his talent don't make it, it's rarely because when they showed up, it was like, man, that guy's not nearly as good as that people thought he was. It's usually because something silly happens off the scenes or an injury occurs and just changes everything. This guy, though, with his pedigree and where he kind of slots out nationally at that position, it's as sure thing as really you can get inside the state of Texas other than the quarterback position.
Wow. So where did you put in a future cast, Ketch?
I did about a month ago.
Okay. It was that future cast for Texas?
It was. I put in a future cast for Texas back on June 27th.
Oh, okay. Okay. When you put in that future cast, Ketch, what gave you the belief or the confidence from everything that you were, hearing, reporting on, hearing behind the scenes, reading the tea leaves, that you felt like really comfortable that, I guess for lack of better terms, because this probably would be their biggest defensive signee? Is that fair to say in Sarkisian's era. I know. I mean, Justice Finkley was pretty legit. Obviously, last year they picked up a bunch of guys, but Malik.
Hey, real quick,
yeah.
Anwar, Malik Muhammad has just announced on Twitter, or excuse me, on Instagram, that he has committed to Texas.
Okay. There it is.
Breaking news here on the Drunk
Breaking
Uncle.
news. Breaking news. Did someone put that right there? Here we go. All right.
I double confirmed it on his Instagram page just to make sure. Quinn Ewers, as far as I can see, the first to respond with the hook 'em.
Wow. All right, guys. For you Longhorn fans, Drunk Uncle time, it's party time. That goes back to the original question that was, Catch. Does this commitment, does it end up being the biggest defensive commitment for Steve Sarkisian at Texas?
I mean, you're talking about either him or Terrence Brooks, the true freshman who's on campus right now. Those are, at this point, the truly elite of the elite commitments that the Longhorns have been able to get on the defensive side of the ball. I think among all the things that I mentioned about Malik Muhammad, the least of which isn't, as long as this kid stays healthy and keeps his head above water, this is a kid that I think plays on Sunday. I think it's a Dallas commit that is an area where there are a couple of incredibly important defensive prospects still on the board. I think if you're Texas, and this is right before the A&M pool party and all of the things that are taking place, if you're Texas, you're trying to continue the arch tsunami. You want that momentum to continue. The commitment of Malik Muhammad to Texas does exactly that. And I think, the Longhorns are very conscious about the commitments that are coming next. Anthony Hill, Javian Toviano, David Hicks, Hicks now in the Houston area because of his father taking a job in the Katy area, but Toviano and Hill, both Metroplex kids. Muhammad, the first of the really mega defensive prospects in the state of Texas to announce their decision. And the Longhorns are going to hope that this momentum keeps things going downhill.
Catch, I mean, we've talked about this before. Is this for you, Catch, as a guy who's been doing this, for a bunch of years? Is this basically going back to, and I'm curious because this predates me, I think, a little bit. Does this go back to the Mac Brown era of commitment? You used to always say, Catch, that Mac Brown would kind of get his class kind of early and then leave the scraps to like everybody else within the state or, within the country. Or is this the closest thing this offseason that you've seen to those Mac Brown heydays, or is that a little bit of hyperbole in your book?
I'll need you. The thing is, Texas hasn't won the state yet. Mm-hmm. They get a couple of more guys, and you're going to legitimately, I think at that point, start talking about Texas won the state in recruiting 1 year after Texas A&M won the nation in recruiting with one of the best classes anybody's ever seen built. Mm-hmm. So what's happening this offseason is hard to pin down. Remember, Tom Herman in his first full year of recruiting had an amazing year in state. And a lot of that had to do because a lot of the talent was in Houston. And they had a lot of connections there. And they kind of swept the board for the most part of that Houston area in, 2018. They weren't able to build off of that. I mean, I think one of the real big questions that I have of what we're watching is how sustainable is this? They are right now recruiting at a lights out level that is on the level of what Mac Brown did in his heyday. The thing is, Mac pretty much did that every year. And it wasn't only until Mac was so dominant that he basically created his own rule book and said, I'll cherry pick my players in February and March, which let other schools know if we could just sustain the haymakers in the early part of the recruiting year, we're probably in an advantage over Texas at that point. It's just so unlike anything that we're watching right now to compare those two things. But when you look at what they're doing out of state and what you look at what they're starting to do in state, yeah, I mean, this recruiting class is going to have a chance to finish as the number one in the country. And the way that you get that kind of status is by landing a lot of top 25 to top 50 prospects in the country. And Malik Muhammad is that kind of guy. It's interesting. Rivals has him rated 68th in the country, which is a little bit lower than the other services out there. But matter of fact, I've got all of the rankings already ready to go. So he's number 5 in the Lone Star Recruiting Top 100. Rivals has him as number 68 in the country, the number 11 player in Texas. ESPN has him as the number 38 overall prospect and the number 7 player in Texas. On3 has him as the number 30 overall prospect and the number 3 player in Texas. And 24/7 has him the lowest rated of all at number 78 overall, number 14 in the state, which makes his composite ranking a number 43 overall in the country and the number 7 player in the state of Texas. I think what I would add to that is, in talking with guys within the Rivals network responsible for the rankings, there's a strong belief that he will go up in the next set of rankings. I think closer to top 40, top 50. I don't think he's in that 5-star tier yet in the estimation of the Rivals guys, but I think he's scratching at the door, and he's a guy that they love a lot.
Well, and Jason Suchomel is here with the Adidas hat. Jason, we can't hear you. Go ahead, give us a mic check real quick.
All right, now you got me now?
Yeah, we do. We definitely do have you now. So Jason Suchomel, recruiter extraordinaire. All right, Jason. Ketch and I have been going for about 20 minutes, so you can give Ketch a little breather here. We'll start with you, Jason, with your general overall reaction to Malik Muhammad committing to Texas.
Well, first off, Anwar, I would have been here earlier, but Malik Muhammad found a way to outsmart you and me. Mm-hmm. He posted his commitment video on Instagram. Normally, you and I fast forward to the end of these commitment videos, right?
Yes.
Just to see the answer. You can't do that on Instagram.
No, you can't.
No, and what's worse, Anwar, is I watched about 5 minutes of it. It's a long video. Then I was like, okay, let me click in this other window. And then when I go back to Instagram, it automatically restarts from the beginning. So it starts all over again. But my immediate reaction is, it's been a long time coming. And I say that because we've known he was going to likely pick Texas for several weeks. We've had our stories written and loaded into the Orange Bloods admin for 3 or 4 weeks, I feel like. But there was a time when Texas really wasn't that involved in this one. You go back to late April, Texas was in his top 6, but probably at the bottom of that top 6. They get Malik Muhammad on campus for a visit in early May, an unofficial visit, and things really started picking up steam there. And then he takes his official visit, of course, to Texas in June, and it was kind of a done deal after that. He didn't make it official, of course, until tonight, and really didn't, I don't think he even told the Texas staff until this week. But just a tremendous pickup. I mean, I heard Ketch when I came in, and I tend to agree with Ketch. I don't know that he will ever get into five-star status. That's pretty lofty territory. But I think he has a chance to really just scratch at that door. And who knows, with a great senior season, maybe he gets there. But anytime you're getting a in-state player over Texas A&M, that's a big win. Alabama really wanted Malik Muhammad. This isn't one where, Nick Saban was just kind of casually recruiting him. No, Alabama really wanted Malik Muhammad, Manny Muhammad as he goes by. So big pickup for Texas. Big reason for Texas fans to be celebrating tonight.
Jason, I'll ask you what I had asked Ketch a little bit earlier. Is this the biggest defensive recruiting win for Sarkisian here at Texas, in your opinion?
It's up there. What was Ketch's answer? Ketch, I'm trying to think. Justice Finkley was big because he stole an Alabama kid out of Alabama.
Brooks.
Terrence Brooks is big. They're right there neck and neck, him and Brooks. I almost would lean Brooks just because you flipped him from Ohio State so late in the process. Again, getting Justice Finkley, not quite as highly ranked, but you're getting an Alabama kid out of Alabama that Alabama really wanted, a guy that we all feel is going to be a big contributor for Texas. So I don't know if it's the biggest, Anwar, but it's a short list if you're calling roll before this one. So Terrence Brooks is probably a pretty good answer, Catch, when you consider the timing of it, the fact that he was committed to Ohio State for so long.
Anwar,
So,
real quick,
yeah.
just to follow
Go ahead,
up
Kate.
on
No,
that.
no, 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 no. Feel free.
You might make the case that actually Muhammad is, I was listening to Suchomel and he kind of talked me into maybe Muhammad being the biggest of the two. It is a head-to-head win over Texas A&M. I think at a really critical time.
Hey, Terrence Brooks' dad played at A&M and came up with the name Wrecking Crew. So.
Well, then there's that.
Yeah.
I think in 2 or 3 years removed, that question feels maybe a little different. Maybe even in 2 or 3 months. The thing that comes next is what happens with the next big three defensive prospects in the state of Texas. You're really seeing the board in 2023 start to clear off. I mean, guys are making their announcements, and certainly you've seen where Texas has gone on a flurry over the course of the last month or so. What had really been, we'd all been waiting to see what happens with the big four defensive prospects in the state this year. Malik Muhammad is the first of the big four, and 4 of the top 5 guys in my rankings this year. I mean, I've got 4 defensive players, Jonte Cook being the other. Muhammad, the question is this momentum with Texas and Arch and Muhammad, is it going to lead to momentum that helps them clip one of these other prospects? Because look, if in a month or if we get to signing day and A&M goes 1, 2, 3 on Hicks, Hill, and Toviano, it won't necessarily feel like Texas won the one recruiting in the class of 2023 with the state of Texas, even though it will be fantastic. And there will be a lot of big-time prospects that they will sign, Muhammad included. These last 3 guys loom. And if Muhammad is able to create momentum where 1 turns into 2 or even 3, well, then we'll look back, I think, historically and say the Muhammad thing had a little extra juice to it. Right now, on an apple for apple, 1 guy versus 1 guy, it's so close. I mean, it's probably beauty in the eye of the beholder.
Catch and Jason, of those big 3 that are left, what do you guys think? Not for percentages or odds, but your thoughts on Texas landing, what's left on the board of the big 3 Catch that you start. Catch, can you go and then Jason go next? I'm just curious what you guys think.
Well,
as of
the
right
thought
now,
had been that Toviano, who's, I think in order, the players go Hicks, Hill, Toviano, 1, 2, 3. I think that's how Rivals has those 3 guys ranked, although weirdly enough, they've got TJ Shanahan ranked above all 3, which kind of blows my mind, if for no other reason than the defensive end position in the state of Texas couldn't be any more valuable with regards to projecting into the NFL future. Toviano, for such a long time, has been thought to be leaning towards A&M. In fact, when I put my Muhammad future cast in back on June 27th to Texas, one of the things that I had been told behind the scenes was there's a feeling that Muhammad and Toviano wouldn't end up at the same school together, and that Muhammad was really leaning towards Texas because he was kind of the unquestioned number 1 DB in a world where he commits to Texas. Yet with Toviano over the course of the last couple of weeks, and it's really one of the things we've got to continue to look into. Jason went on vacation last week. Seems like Texas, it feels like the internet scuttlebutt is that Texas is making up ground on Toviano. How much? Enough? And with the pool party coming up this weekend, enough to withstand all of that? I mean, it remains to be seen. But I think his recruitment calls for some special consideration and viewing. I think same thing with Anthony Hill. He's a guy that Texas has felt really good about. When the end of this month arrives, will they feel as good as they already have? And then I think the feeling with Hicks is they've got ground to make up. And whereas I think Jason and I still have Texas as the betting favorite with Hill, knowing that could change, I think the feeling exists in the other side of the coin with Hicks. It feels like Texas has a fighting chance, but you're certainly not going to see Suchomel or I put in not to speak for him, but it's unlikely I would think that either of us would put in a future cast for Texas with Hicks.
And let me put in my future cast for DJ Hicks as we talk. I will agree with Ketch, and I'll expound a little bit, and I'll just go one by one. I think Anthony Hill, Anwar, and I'm on record on Orange Bloods as saying this, and I said it the weekend he visited it, so it's not really new. This is not Johnny come lately. I think Texas emerged from that weekend as the team to beat. I think having a couple of former teammates, Austin Jordan, Jatavian Sanders in Austin, is going to help Texas there. I think Texas leads for Anthony Hill. Now, he is going to take a Texas A&M unofficial visit at the end of this month on the 31st, I believe it is. They're having their pool party. Going to come to Austin, what I was told this week rather, from his father. Originally, Anwar, they thought it was going to be an official visit, because A&M, for the people watching, A&M mistakenly was telling kids, yeah, come in for an official visit. Well, you can't take official visits the last weekend of July. So, that's kind of A&M stepping on their toes a little bit, but it could work in their favor, weirdly. They're going to get him in on an unofficial visit, Anthony Hill. If he winds up going into the fall and not deciding, they still have their official visit left. So they could get him back on campus for an official visit. He hasn't said this. Anthony just says, hey, I'm going to decide when it feels right, when my gut feels, when it feels right in my gut. I think he probably decides before his senior season. I don't know that for sure. I don't think he knows that for sure. But I just get the sense that maybe he is getting closer. He's down to 2 schools. I think he's getting close to just being ready to have an end to this process. So I do favor Texas on Anthony Hill right now, but you got to withstand this A&M visit coming up. DJ Hicks is supposed to visit, I believe he's visiting Oklahoma and A&M that last weekend of July. If you're a Texas fan, obviously you would have killed to have gotten him on campus for UT's pool party on the 29th, barbecue/pool party on July 29th. All that being said, Anwar, just in communicating with DJ Hicks's dad and talking to other people, I think Texas is playing from behind. I do agree with Ketchum there, but I think Texas is in a better position to close that gap than I think maybe a lot of people realize. I think if Hicks waits until maybe December, which is not out of the question for him to take this thing down to the wire, if Texas plays well on the field, if they show some flashes on defense, I think Texas has a real chance to surprise people. There was a time a month ago people were giving Texas 0 chance with DJ Hicks. I think Texas has a real chance. They're a better chance than people imagine. Javian Toviano, I do agree with Ketch. I think the Arch impact has had an effect. He said as much. He told Rivals.com down at the Future 50 that that's something he's watching, and it obviously elevates Texas a little bit. Toviano's run hot and cold early in his recruitment. Everybody thought he was a shoo-in for Texas, and then A&M was the team to beat for the longest time. I do think Texas is playing from behind there. Can they close that gap? Can they make a move there? Not out of the question. I asked him the week before last, are you going to make it in for that pool party at Texas? And he said, hey, not sure yet. So it wasn't a no, but he said, I'll let you know. Not sure yet. And I don't think he's decided just yet. But I think Texas is playing for behind with Toviano. I think they've increased their chances in the last few weeks with Toviano. But as it stands right now, I still don't think it's enough. I think if he was to decide right now, they'd certainly be on the outside looking in.
Is there anybody, Ketch and Jason, outside of the top 3 that that Texas could get that you would say that's part of the wow factor, or are these kind of like the main guys at this point?
Well, I'd start at linebacker. Darian Gillette of Marlin and transferring to Teague. He's a Rivals 100 player. Braylon Shelby, another edge player. He's a Rivals 100 player. So, I think that those would be the other 2 big gets if Texas is able to close out outside of the big 3 that we just talked about. So those are all tremendous players. It would be huge additions for the Texas class.
I would include Shelby in that conversation. Anwar, I think we talked about Malik Muhammad maybe being a guy that can jump up into 5-star territory before the rankings are put to bed. I think Shelby, a guy that's 6'5", 235, ultra athletic, really just starting to grow into it. I'm going to make sure the national guys know guys with his athletic profile they turn into NFL players at the highest of return rates. I mean, you couldn't find guys with a better physical set of tools to work with. I think Gillette was knocking on that door potentially. Now we're talking, no offense, but we're talking about a small town kid coming off of what looks to be a major injury. There's a lot of questions with Gillette that would keep me from including him in the elite of the elite of the elite territory. Although he is potentially a guy that can be an all Big 12 linebacker and all SEC type of player at linebacker. That's where I think his best position is. Real quick, just because Jason and I both filibustered for a little bit, and I want to make sure that we acknowledge the two super chats that came in. One was up there for a while. I don't even remember who did it, but thanks to Tom G. There we go. Thank you, Blake, for making that happen. We love guys in Virginia being able to watch. That's what this is all about, right? It's Orange Bloods on YouTube. That's also a reminder, guys. Get on YouTube or get on the Orange Bloods right now. I don't think we have a super duper special out. We will soon, but you're missing out if you're not on Orange Bloods right now. We're doing this analysis on video, but if you've been on the website, you might even be Malik Muhammad out a little bit, because even upon the announcement right at the top of the hour, I think we had 3 or 4 different content pieces breaking down his commitment. It's kind of what we do. So if you love the taste that we give you on the Orange Bloods football channel, like and subscribe. You'll love what we're doing at Orange Bloods if you haven't been there yet. Sorry, Anwar, just thought I'd do a little
what was the second super chat too, Catch?
The one was from Tom G. Malik Muhammad to the good guys. Who is our next? Okay, Jason, who's the next commit? That's always the question.
I'm going to kill 2 birds.
Add another O-line to this class. Wink, wink. I read about the offensive lineman from Florida. Wink, wink.
Yeah, I'm going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone on this one. Peyton Kirkland, the offensive lineman out of Tampa, Florida, scheduled to announce Saturday. 3 days ago, he releases a top 5 that doesn't include Texas. A little over a week ago, he releases a top 2 that doesn't include Texas. That top 2 turned into a top 5. As it stands tonight, Texas has crept into that mix, very much crept into that mix. If I'm making a prediction as we're broadcasting this live, I think Peyton Kirkland to Texas is your next commitment. And that answers the second part. Yes, they're going to add an offensive lineman, which would give them a 5th offensive lineman in this class after taking 7 next year. There are some delicate potentially moving parts in this one that could impact things, Catch. I think, between now and Saturday, right? I think you and I would agree with that, but there's extreme confidence from people I talk to that this thing looks really, really good for Texas, for Peyton Kirkland to make an announcement for Texas on Saturday evening.
How does a guy go from a top 5 to a top 2 that doesn't have Texas
to
all of a sudden he's a Texas lean?
Anwar, he went from a top 2 to a top 5 to then inserting Texas. So everything about this one is backwards, right? So if he ends up picking somebody that's not even in his top 5 or 6 on Saturday, I mean, who the heck knows, I can just tell you, as of my last conversation with a key source, maybe an hour and a half, I don't know, 2 hours ago, whenever it was, but it looks really good for Texas. But again, I think there are potentially some choppy waters that may have to be navigated between now and Saturday.
Told Jason to put in a future cast.
I did put in my future cast.
That's what I'm saying. That was the level of confidence.
Oh yeah. And I'm not willy-nilly with those. I usually don't do it unless I feel pretty good about my pick. Yeah.
Longhorn wife says, shout out to my husband, David, who will watch this live stream when he, is home from work. Thanks for the consistent, great content, OB team. Catch, I have told you, I run into wife after wife after wife. And anytime I start saying I talk to the wives, everyone always has some smart comments on the chat or something like that. I run into so many women who are like, hey, my husband loves what you guys do. He loves watching the show. He loves reading the pulpit or Jason stuff or Catch's thoughts for the weekend. Like, and maybe it's just as simple as the wives know that their husbands are at home sitting in the living room, and they're like, listen, he ain't being a knucklehead anymore. He ain't hanging out with the boys and the fellas, coming home drunk. You know what? He's sitting there on Orange Blood. So you know what, honey? $10 a month, and you're going to behave. I am all for it. Go see what those idiots at Orange Bloods have to say. You have saved our marriage.
Hey,
that could be it, right?
I got a little secret, Anwar. You can read Orange Bloods at the bar. But
hey, Anwar, $9.95 a month is always better than $20 for every 3 minutes. So, it's easy, I think, to be popular. What's that?
I said, is it though? I guess from a wallet standpoint.
Well, I think you said it. What would be better than both at the same time?
Yeah.
I don't know that you can beat that. It's funny, Jason, we've got the Kirkland thing, with all due respect to the Malik Muhammad commitment, which is if Kirkland commits to the Longhorns, make no mistake about it, the Muhammad news tonight is by far and away the most significant thing that we could possibly talk about. But the Kirkland thing is so out of left field, right field, whatever field you want to talk about, that it's kind of turned into, weirdly, the story of the night. And there are a lot of people. Someone said this, we've got Chase talking about Kirkland tweeted that it was false. There's that component of this on where you joked about he had 5 and then he had 2 and then he was back to 5 again. And the Longhorns weren't in the middle of any of that pack. And then this week they're in the pack potentially. And, Jason and I have sources independent of each other that have confirmed the Kirkland stuff. So although one, I think, slightly more nervous than the other, and it'll be interesting to see how this thing plays out. But I think part of Texas's leverage with Kirkland, who, full transparency, I think his mom works for Trent Williams' charitable foundation. If I've heard this correctly, they've got connections to Trent Williams, the future NFL Hall of Famer, I think, from Oklahoma. And I think there was a lot of people who thought Oklahoma, and I think Oklahoma could be the mom's favorite. So I think the Longhorns have a lot of work to do, even if they get his commitment on Saturday.
He's never even visited, Ketch. So
you and I, having done this 20 plus years, I can't say that anything jumps to mind to compare the Kirkland recruitment. Can you? Is there anything that jumps to mind?
One of the things I remember most when I was pretty new, I say pretty new, I was with the Orange Bloods probably 5 or 6 years, which sadly that was pretty new compared to 20 years in now, right? But I remember talking to a coach at Texas at the time, and we were talking about a recruit, and everybody thought, I don't even remember who the recruit was, if I'm being completely honest, but everybody thought this kid was going to pick Texas. And I asked this coach, and this coach was an elder statesman in the coaching community at this time. He's now retired. And he told me at that time, he goes, in all my years of coaching, I've never had a kid commit that didn't come take a visit to my school. So we're talking about a unicorn if Peyton Kirkland picks Texas on Saturday. Now, he'll take his visit eventually, but to commit before ever having seen campus, that did happen a couple times. Like Casey Kane did it in COVID, but they didn't have a choice. They couldn't visit camp. They couldn't visit colleges and campuses and coaches. I guess they could visit and walk around the campuses, but they couldn't meet with coaches and things because it was a dead period throughout their whole recruitment. So he would be, honestly, man, my 20 plus years, he might be the first one I can remember potentially to commit to Texas without, to my knowledge, I don't think he's ever stepped foot on campus or met face to face with the coaches other than when they visited his school in Florida.
I wonder if this is about options, Anwar.
I think
Texas
there's a lot
is
of
in an incredibly good position, and they're now in a position where they can go to a national 250 guy that's never even visited and say, hey, man, we only got so many scholarships. We're going to fill up. And you think about a guy like Cedric Baxter, one of the top running backs in the country from Orlando, who's going to be making his decision shortly. Yeah. These two guys are essentially neighbors. I mean, they play in the same city. I would guess they know each other. I wonder if Arch, what happens if Arch picks up the phone and texts this guy and suddenly there's a coolness factor with Texas in this recruiting class. I just think Texas might have some leverage that makes this completely out of right field kind of thing possible, because now that they're at the numbers that they're at, they legitimately, if this kid wanted to wait and take more visits, there is a world where he doesn't have a spot in this class, because I don't think he's a guy that you save a spot for. So there are only so many spots. If college football is a game of musical chairs, as LSU's head coach Brian Kelly said on Monday at the SEC Media Days, so is this Texas football recruiting class. And I think we may be seeing a guy take his spot. If he commits on Saturday, I think we'll be talking about a guy that took his spot while he could. And I think he knows it.
Well, here's the question I have, Ketch, and maybe I'm saying the quiet thing out loud. Is it as simplistic as the NIL opportunities at Texas could be potentially greater than some of the other options that he's looking at?
I'll jump in there. I mean, Miami has been thrown around. Yeah,
can we keep it real and keep it a buck in 2022? Or are we gonna? I mean, we can talk about the great educational system at the University of Texas and how great Austin is and all those other kind of things, and all those things are true. But we could also can we talk about NIL just a little bit?
Well, you're fortunate for Texas that you don't have to preach it to them, because they know if you're an offensive lineman, you're going to get 50K, 50K per year once you step on campus. You've got Miami that's running NIL money like it's candy, Halloween candy, but technically I don't think in the state of Florida, I think it's like Texas, you're not supposed to make those deals with high school teenagers. Well, Texas, you don't have to make that deal, because he can just look in the press clippings and say, oh, wait, these guys are getting 50K once they get on campus. But, if we're going to keep it real, Anwar, I don't think a couple of the schools that are on his list are pushing quite as hard as maybe they once were. So I think that's helped open a door for Texas a little bit too. But to be clear, I mean, Kyle Flood has been recruiting Peyton Kirkland for a long, long time. He's 6'7", 325. I just had to look, 6'7", 325. So he fits the mold of what Texas or what Kyle Flood likes. Texas wants another tackle. So, Flood's liked him for a long time. So I think there are a lot of things, the pieces of this puzzle are fitting together, minus the potential hiccup that Ketch mentioned, if that's true, about his mom working in Trent Williams' foundation. That could make things a little bit slippery over the next 72 hours.
All right, real quick, because they did pay for it. Overweight Lover is asking. We always love the Overweight Lover in the house, Heavy D. If y'all had to bet money on what 4 kids will go to Big 12 Media Days next year, who would y'all pick? I got 2 that come to mind right away.
It's got to be Quinn. Has to be one, right?
Quinn and Xavier.
Quinn and Xavier are the easy ones, and then it's who could be the other potential guys?
Maybe Byron Murphy, maybe.
Yeah,
or Alfred Collins, if Collins has a great. I mean, I'm trying to think of who would be upperclassmen on that defense.
Ryan
whoever.
Watts, maybe. I mean,
the 2 best players that emerge on the defensive side of the ball that at this point doesn't have anybody that's emerged as a big-time player yet. I mean, Overshown's kind of grandfathered there this year. Ovi is there based on what they think. What do we think? Was that he's the smartest guy on the defense and won't Moro Ajomo his way through the press conference? Like, Ovi is just non-controversial.
Yeah, they're going to want to take guys that are, pretty eloquent speakers and are going to give safe answers as well. So, I'm trying to think. Alfred Collins, Ryan Watts, in my experience, has been a pretty good interview.
He'd be young though. Like you typically take older guys to the.
But if he comes in this year and is a starter throughout the course of the season, like we think he might be able to, then he could be a guy. But yeah.
Jason, you got work to do. Anwar and I can take over.
Okay. Well, I'm just gonna stick around for a bit. But hey, if you guys want to get rid of me, fine. So I'll start my drunk uncle sidekick cocktail here as soon as I get off.
Well, you said you had something to do at 7. I don't want to Anwar not to be like one of those dates.
Yeah,
I got to until 6:59.
I have a call to make at 7, but if I'm being honest, my expectations of this person actually taking my call and giving me an interview are pretty low. So we'll see, but I'm gonna give it a shot.
All right. Well, then,
text.
all right. Well, all right. You want to hang around? So we'll give you a couple more minutes. I'll throw. I got there's 2 questions that have been kind of rolling around in my head. All right, Ketch, and I'll start with you. Ketch, there's certain things that they say are, somewhat recession proof, right? Whatever investments that there are, maybe it's kind of like, apartment complexes or something like that. I have to ask someone with more money than myself. Is Steve Sarkisian so far recession proof? Because we're seeing guys from what we've seen on the field last year totally ignoring what they saw and saying, I'm going here, and not just recruits. Like Texas Tech has recruits, right? Texas Tech has a high number of recruits, but they don't have a high number of what we consider to be elite prospects, nationally ranked guys. I mean, I know obviously if he goes, has any resemblance of this, is going to be kind of hard to do, but have this kind of success. But it almost seems like he's recession proof when it comes to recruiting. Am I crazy on this?
On the offensive side of the ball, maybe. Mm-hmm. I mean, we can't get too carried away with what they've done defensively recruiting at this point. It's not like, I don't want to get Texas fans. We have the highest volume of people watching live right now than we have at any point during the show so far. But what A&M did on the defensive side of the ball last year in recruiting was so disgustingly good that we can't, we need to see, they need to get a few more of the guys that we were just talking about, Hicks, Hill, Toviano, Shelby. You get 2 of those 4, that's amazing. But I think it is one of the things that this recruiting staff on the defensive side of the ball, and for me, Muhammad is a step in the right direction. But in this class, he's one truly, well, Derek Williams as well. They're on their way. It's true.
That is true.
Yeah. I actually am supposed to talk to this person off the record, so that would not go over very well.
We won't tell anybody. Guess who it is in the first place?
Yeah, nobody's watching this. Yeah, that would not go over well. Almar, to answer your question, is he recession proof? I think he is right now. If they go 6-6 this year, obviously 5-7, maybe even 7-5, he won't get that same Teflon coating.
Well, that would mean he's not recession proof.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying he is right now. Yeah. I don't know how long the recession is going to last, but yeah, I think they've got to show improvement. I talked actually to some guys about this today, and I said, everything's rainbow and sunshine, or the hell the unicorns, right now, but they've got to back it up with some improvement on the field. If they don't back it up with improvement on the field, they're going to have to scratch and claw to hang on to some of these commitments.
But does he? But does he, Jason? When he's got Arch Manning coming in 2023, like, can't you still sell this year as a part of the building process with first year of Quinn? Arch is coming next. Like, I mean, doesn't that buy him still another potential year? I'm not saying any Texas fan wants this year to be a bad year, a subpar year, a 7-6 year, but doesn't Arch still kind of buy you some more time from a recruiting perspective?
I think it's a good point, Anwar, and I think it probably does. And you can say, hey, it's our first year with Quinn, but you know what? After a while, then it starts to get to be excuse making. Last year, it was our first year in the program, and we're changing the culture and the buy-in, and then it's Quinn's first year. So it probably would help a little bit. And I don't think Arch Manning, and again, I literally talked about this with some lunch bunch guys today, and I said, I don't think Arch is the type that's going to peel off regardless. I mean, Arch, I think his family takes a big picture view, but some of these guys that have committed, maybe some of the out-of-state guys who, I don't want to say committed on a whim, certainly, because they put some thought into it, but, maybe they committed a little more quickly than people thought. You're going to have to fight to hang on to those guys if you don't back it up with development on the field and winning play on the field. Now, I don't think Texas has to go 10-2, 11-1, or necessarily even win the Big 12 conference. You know, Jonte Cook, I tell you what, in a video interview with Rivals this week, I guess it was last weekend, it technically was recorded. He said, you know, he doesn't expect Texas to win the Big 12 title this year but he thinks by the time he's there, and he's a sophomore, I think is what he said, they expect to be playing for national championships. So, you know, there are some guys who kind of take that view 2, 3, 4 years down the road, but there are other guys that I think would want to see immediate progress. It's got to be better than 5-7, obviously. Now, I don't think you're going to see a huge wave of guys decommitting, but I think you'd see some guys wavering and flirting with other programs. And I've said this on previous videos that we've done before. Some of that also depends on what's happening in College Station. Some of that depends on what's happening in Norman, Oklahoma. If A&M's having a great year, if Oklahoma's having a great year, and Texas goes 6-6, yeah, you'd probably see some wandering eyes.
Ketch, give me your thoughts, and then we'll go to the overweight level in his question here, because I still got some more questions for you. What are your thoughts?
And Jason can speak to this because he and I are both old enough to have been covering Texas recruiting. We both had hair at that point when Chris Sims committed to Texas. And beyond the 1999 class, you know, the greatest dividends that Sims ever played, he was a really good player. And at his best, he was probably the best, you know, pro-level quarterback type guy that Texas had in ever when he was there. But he just kept paying off in recruiting. You know, after that 99 class in 2000, he was a big part of the BJ, Roy, and Sloan year in recruiting. The next year, Cedric Benson comes along, and Benson wanted to play with Sims. There's a lot of talk, even back when Vince Young was coming along in recruiting. This will sound very much like Arch, but Vince, you know, ended up knowing that he had guys in front of him. He wasn't naive to the quarterbacks that they had recruited. He redshirts in 2002 because, like Quinn Ewers being on campus, Sims was on campus. But in terms of recruiting, Texas hasn't had many Arch Mannings commit. Most schools haven't. I mean, those types of guys just don't grow on trees. This is UT's second NFL quarterback giant, media giant, great kind of, you know, commitment in the last 20 plus years. And the Sims residuals didn't just stop in the recruiting class that he was in. So I do think even next year, Arch, especially with offensive guys, you will still see Arch carry, I think, some big weight with regards to what he means in recruiting. And I'm just basing that off of really the one time in history we've ever seen a guy that it was 20 years ago, but the ripple effects of Sims and recruiting continued for years. And that may be the case with Manning too. I mean, you know, I can't say it's not a possibility.
All right, so Ketch, I got some really good questions for you. But hey, Jason, you got about 5 more minutes to hang in there.
Yep.
All right, Jason, I'll start with you. So, you know, I'm going to jump around a little bit, but with Muhammad, right, and his commitment, does this kind of alleviate any recruiting concerns that there may have been about Pete Kwiatkowski and what he was able to do, and does this kind of like turn it the narrative a little bit by getting a guy like this, or are we giving him the credit for that? Are we giving Terry Reynolds the credit for that?
Terry Joseph.
I mean, I'm just kind of curious your thought process.
No, it doesn't. I don't think PK had a whole lot to do with this one. Terry Joseph.
Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Terry Joseph. You know, some of the support staff was instrumental in this one. So, you know, Kwiatkowski's a better recruiter, I think, you know, than some people maybe give him credit for. But he's your D coordinator. That's not really what you bring those guys in for. I mean, he helps on some guys, but I don't think he had an impact on Malik Muhammad. You know, Chris Gilbert was instrumental on Malik Muhammad. So, no, I don't think it gets PK off the hook in terms of recruiting at all.
What about you, Ketch?
No, I mean, we need to see some big guys up front. They you know, I mean, it is the thing that we'll be waiting to see the rest of the way in recruiting. And, you know, I mean, if Texas is really good on the field this year, there are stakes involved in this season that kind of determine what next year's recruiting might look like. I think Texas has got some 2024 momentum going right now. They've got commitments from 2 of the top 5 guys in the state for 2024 as early commitments. I think they've got it going. So this season's about being able to just keep the excitement level high. And there's a lot of that right now. And if Quinn Ewers is pretty good and this team is pretty good, they don't have to win a championship to keep that going. You have to just be able to sell what sounds like an exciting story. And I do think that Steve Sarkisian has that. And if somewhere along the lines he has to make a change defensively, you know, when Texas recruited lights out on defense when Bull Reese was their defensive coordinator. And then when they moved out Bull Reese under Mac Brown 20 years ago, it never changed the momentum in recruiting. God, honestly, to be fair to Kwiatkowski, other than Will Muschamp, Jason, the defensive coordinator job, you know, your offensive coordinator typically is responsible for the quarterback position, but
and that's about it.
And that's about it. And the defensive coordinator position isn't always asked to do a lot of heavy lifting in recruiting. So I don't know that Kwiatkowski not being a huge impact in recruiting is much different than what we've seen over the last 25 years or so, with the
Especially when you got Jeff Choate helping recruit some of the same position there, you know. So
I'm just saying that they don't live and die by who the defensive coordinator is. However, to be able to close the deal on guys with Hicks, Hill, pedigree like that, they're going to want to see this defense perform better.
All right, Jason, close us out. Why don't you answer the question from Overweight Lover, and then Ketch, I've got one hell of a question for you after Jason is done, and then you'll be off the podcast, unfortunately, Jason, so you won't get a chance to answer it. But go ahead and can you answer if no Hicks, who should we be excited for on the DL?
On the down low? No. Overweight Lover is on Heavy D. Believe it or not, I have the Heavy D CD. I probably still got it on my CD case. That's how old and outdated I am. I still have a CD case, but along with my
player now.
Yeah, I need to get it on vinyl. That's right. But not a lot. Overweight Lover.
Shelby.
What's that, Ketch?
Shelby.
Yeah, I guess technically it can be kind of either or. I mean, Rivals technically has him as a linebacker, but he's an edge player, so you can call him a defensive lineman. I guess you could classify him that. Colton Vasek, I think you could be excited about him, but that's Texas and Oregon, and he's even though he's right here in Austin, man, he's a tough one to get a very good read on. I don't think people even at Westlake have a great read on him. Some scuttlebutt, call it third or fourth hand that I heard this week, maybe favors Oregon. So we're still trying to solidify that intel and see how accurate that is. Marcus Deal is a good defensive lineman. He'll be in town on the 29th for the barbecue deal. So there's not a lot, and they've got a couple out-of-state guys they're talking to as well. But, you know, Hicks is obviously the main guy. I would say Hicks and Vasek probably at this point are the two main guys you should be mostly excited about. And if you miss on those two, then if you're Texas, then you got to kind of figure out where to go from there. So on that note, Anwar, I want to sign off, but I do want to say I didn't realize Anwar would have his fedora on. Next time I'm on a drunk uncle live show, Anwar, this is going to floor you, Anwar. I don't know if I still have it, but I used to have a fedora probably 7 or 8 years ago that I'd wear it to like the beach, but it was more like a straw fedora, not quite as fancy as yours. But next time I'm on, if I still have that thing, I'm going to break that sucker out. I don't even know it'll fit around the brim of my head.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. All that matters is the effort. All that matters is the effort.
Perch it right on top of my head a little bit. Yeah. So
all that matters is the effort. I've got some fedoras here. Yeah,
I'm gonna wear my Hawaiian beach shirt with pineapples on it and my little fedora that may or may not fit on my head.
Michael, Suchomel knew me for about 10 years with hair. Just so you know.
Yep.
Yeah. And Ketch posted a picture about a month or so ago with hair.
Yeah. Many moons ago, Michael. Many moons ago.
All right, Jason, get out of here. I appreciate you joining. And let's. All right, so Ketch, we've got probably almost like about 600 people that are in the chat right now. So
can I just respond to somebody in the chat real quick?
Yeah, go for it. Because
it's literally related to tonight. Let me find it. Trevor posted this. And by the way, Trevor, thanks for contributing in the chat. I don't mean to call you out, but I did feel the need to respond. He said that Malik Muhammad has the Kobe boys feel right now. Let's see where the work ethic is and hope for the best return. I'm just telling you right now, I evaluated both. Kobe boys, never a day in his life was he as good as Malik Muhammad. And I think one of the things I love about Malik Muhammad, Anwar, the dude's got a championship ring on his finger right now. Like, he plays in one of the best programs in the state, in South Oak Cliff. The improvement they've made year on year for the last half decade or so. And that guy arrives with a pedigree that you want your players to have. And he's just a sensationally better football player than a guy like Kobe Boyce was. And I'd have to go back and look at what I had Kobe Boyce ranked, but he wasn't within a 1,000-foot pole of being a top 5 guy in the state. And I would say go watch Malik Muhammad's huddle film. The thing that's so interesting about that guy is that they'll play him as a press corner. They'll play him as a free safety. They'll play him in the slot. They'll play him at wide receiver and making plays and making difference-making plays all over the field, either side of the ball. He returns kicks. Like, we're talking about a different animal than a Kobe Boyce. And, you know, just in case you were wondering, in case you needed it when you put your head on a pillow tonight to feel better, this guy's closer to being a Cedric Griffin type prospect and a multi-year starter and a guy that plays on Sundays than he is to a guy that, quite frankly, I wasn't the biggest fan of when they recruited in the first place. Okay, had to get that out of my system.
No, it's good. No, because you know what, Ketch, you know, just the piggyback that is, it's more like when his film just jumps. You sometimes you watch guys and you go, oh, okay. And then sometimes you watch other guys like him and you say, oh, snap, like this guy's the real deal. In everything I've seen of Muhammad, like to your point, Ketch, everything he does, so especially sometimes some of these hits that he has on guys, his closing speed, like he's special. Like so 100% agree with you. And like I said, you've evaluated Kobe, so you probably can tell the absolute difference. Okay, so here's what I have for you, Ketch, okay? And this is also a question for everybody who is in the chat.
Okay.
So this is all for all you guys who are in the chat. I want you guys to give me your answer to this buy or sell question. It's going to be a good one, all right? For those of you just lurking and you never post anything, feel free to chime in because I think this is going to be a really interesting discussion that we can have for the next 15, 20 minutes or so. Ketch, we acknowledge that Sarkisian is recruiting at a high level, right? That thing is obvious. There's no debate about that. The 2022 class was good. 2023 class potentially better. So the buy or sell question I have for you, based on the talent level and talent that we see Texas acquiring, buy or sell. Will Texas win a Big 12 championship before they join the SEC? Everybody who's in this chat right now, I need your answer to that as Ketch mulls this over and thinking about 2022, 2023. So maybe this.
Well, that's it for me. It's next 2 seasons.
So the next 2 seasons, buy or sell based off of what we're seeing from a talent acquisition standpoint, buy or sell, is Texas going to win a Big 12 championship, assuming they go in 2024? We could do an asterisk and do another one and say 2025, but let's say 2024 is it. Next 2 seasons, does Texas win a Big 12 championship, buy or sell?
Bye, because Quinn Ewers is supposed to be that dude. And, you know, I shudder to think, quite honestly, because the scary thing, Anwar, is that SEC might be 2024, right? It might be. So it's hard to think at this point, coming on a 5-7 year. We haven't seen it yet, but the window might be the next 17 to 18 months to get that done. Or I don't know when the answer to when does Texas win an SEC championship. I don't know. That's Steve Sarkisian being a much better head coach than we've seen over the course of his career. In the Big 12 next 2 years, I'm going to say bye, because I think next year this roster will be significantly more talented than any roster in the Big 12 at the top. Quarterback, wide receivers. I think all of these guys at the offensive line that come in this year are a year older, and you know who is ready to play at that point. I think that defensively, Texas could use more difference makers to its roster, but I don't know that anybody will be able to out difference make them. So I'll go by. I just the caveat to that is they better win a championship, I think, before they exit the Big 12.
Is it for you, Ketch? Is 2022 the best opportunity for this to occur? You would. So if you had to put the $100 on one or the other, you would put it on 2023 and not 2022.
For me, this year is what last year was supposed to be for Card. You have to have the springboard season that kind of gets you on your way. Texas hasn't had that yet. So coming off of a 5-7 year, and what I think actually is a pretty good Big 12. There are no giants, but there aren't a ton of slugs either. So I think next year for me is the best year to win the Big 12. And that's a year where at the end of it, Quinn Ewers is supposed to be the number one pick in the draft. So in order for him to have achieved that type of level where he's able to go pro the way that kid has it planned out in his head, that means he has a monster 2023. And at the very, very least, Texas is 60 minutes away from a Big 12 championship. Whatever happens in that game, happens in that game. But it's really hard for me to imagine next year Quinn Ewers being that good and Texas not playing for the championship.
See, I'll probably buy on it, Ketch. So I won't predict 2022. If you told me today they did it, I wouldn't be shocked. Like I never, no part of me like this is just ludicrous by any stretch of the imagination. Because even if there's question marks on the defense, Ketch, and we know there's going to be that, and even there's a few question marks on the offense as far as the offensive line is concerned, you still say there's a lot of individual talent that's there for Texas to be in just about every game, because there's so much offensive standpoint. Someone says, "Thanks for fixing your internet, Ketch." I don't think it's a Ketch thing. Ketch can't control Spectrum.
It's Xfinity, actually.
Xfinity, that's what the guys got out there.
It's worked for me up until the last couple of days. I can't really complain about how my internet's been treating me for the last year, but man, it was not good yesterday. Or really going back to Sunday. No issues yet today at all. So fingers crossed.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, Ketch, when I look at what they have from an offensive standpoint this year and all the weapons that they have, I mean, in some ways, I mean, you can't. It almost would be criminal to have had Bijan Robinson for 3 years and him potentially be a first-round draft pick, and you don't win it with him. All right, it just seems like that's. Golly, it almost seems unfair, right?
Yeah.
It would seem unfair to have had that to have happened. It would seem unfair to, Xavier Worthy to be who he is, and still going into year 3, hoping for that to happen. Isaiah Nayor transfers in, all those things. And, and now catch the Kelvin Banks hype that comes out of the Big 12 media days, right? And all of a sudden he starts to become this bigger, larger than life person that, oh my gosh, Banks. And I'm sure we'll hear more of him, in training camp and who he is and what he is. It almost, and then here's the other thing, Ketch, and this is, we'll get into this. We're getting close enough to the season where we can have these, these conversations, Ketch. Outside of the Alabama game, Texas is probably going to be favored in every single game that they play this year, right? I mean, that's probably fair. Maybe OU could be a coin toss. Maybe that's a 1 or 2 point thing, but they're going to be favored in at least 10 of the games, Catch, maybe 11, but I can't imagine too many more where they're not going to be the favorite.
Well, I mean, if the season started today on a neutral field, they wouldn't be favorites, I think, over Baylor and Oklahoma State.
Okay.
Just because those two schools are predicted to finish ahead of Texas. Now, Vegas beats to its own drum. So Vegas looks at Texas as an 8.5 type win team.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, the spirit of your point's not lost. We could probably go back and look in that 5-7 season, and Vegas probably had Texas the favorite in 8 of the games, probably. I have to go back and look, but Texas gets the benefit of the doubt from Vegas a lot.
Catch, overweight lever is back. Isn't DJ Campbell supposed to be better? I'll let you answer this.
I do, but the Texas coaches seem pretty hell-bent on Campbell playing inside and Banks playing at left tackle. And we know that the left tackle position is the most important position on the offensive line. And it just happens to be the position that Texas needs the most immediate help at. So it wouldn't surprise me if both of those guys are starting fairly early in the season. But in terms of filling a need, it's a hell of a thing to be your biggest need. Because if we were an NFL team talking about the Cowboys, and it was like, man, that rookie comes in and settles down left tackle, they're going to be good to go. It would really make you cringe a little bit. I kind of had a buy or sell question for you. So
okay.
Thank you to Overweight Lover for teeing that up, because this was my question before that popped up. If Kelvin Banks gets done dirty by Alabama second game of the season because they have potentially the number 1 player in the draft going against him and Will Anderson.
Yeah.
Will Texas fans give him some benefit of the doubt? Or for the rest of the year, are they terrified because of what happened? Texas fans are just, to me, they freak out a lot. And I think the side of Will Anderson doing their true freshman left tackle dirty would cause some, post-trauma syndrome type stuff going into the Oklahoma game. There's no way at that point you go into the Oklahoma game not wondering if he's the key area of the team in such a competitive game.
You know what? I would sell on that only because I think you and I are talking up Will Anderson to the point that I think Texas fans are understanding this guy is legit. Like we're putting it out there enough, whether it's here on the YouTube videos, here on the things that we write, that shows that everyone knows who Will Anderson is. I don't think that would be the freak out moment. I think the freak out moment, remember Catch last year when we saw Texas against, I think they started against, what was it, Louisiana? They started last year, and we saw like that the offensive line still kind of struggle a little bit in that game. They won, but we didn't walk away saying, man, this offensive line looks solid, and we were shocked at what happened the next week against Arkansas. We still had some points of concern. I think if we see them Texas struggle in week 1 a little bit, Then, of course, whatever is going to happen in week 2, and then UTSA comes to town, and it's still a little bit. Then I think the freak out happens. Like I think Texas will give them Bama. I believe so. I say this understanding our fan base that maybe, but I believe most people understand and believe that Bama's pretty freaking good, and they're not going to freak out. But it all depends too, Ketch. And we're talking about 1.5 sacks versus like a career day.
Well, the ironic thing about this Texas-Alabama matchup is that in Tuscaloosa right now, they're pretty concerned about their offensive line. I mean, for all of the what's Tommy Brockermeyer doing, and he's second or third on the depth chart. I mean, this is a team that has pulled in a Vanderbilt left tackle to come in and play left tackle for them this year. And I can't remember that kid's name. And he's one of the top left tackles that came out in the portal. But it's not like we're talking about a guy that was either first or second team all SEC a year ago. He's a pretty good player. But, I mean, he's not an NFL guy. He could have, if he was that good, he'd just gone to the NFL. So Alabama will come to Texas with some question marks about its offensive line. Surprising, I think, to a lot of Texas fans who will just assume that every guy on that offensive line will be 5 stars because isn't that what Alabama does? I think that Texas and Alabama will both come into that game with questions about that group. Alabama is infinitely more able at this point to apply pressure to those pressure points. And I think maybe the story of that game for Texas is against an Alabama offensive line that Alabama's a little concerned about. Can a defensive line that a year ago couldn't expose something like that at all, can they do it even a little bit? Because if they can, you can see where a Texas-Alabama game's a game for a while. But if they can't, I mean, you can see where this thing in the second week of the season gets ugly. I feel like Alabama would probably feel pretty confident that they can expose some of those areas that Texas has concerns about. I just don't know about Texas. If it was Kansas State, I'd go, yeah, we know some of those guys are proven. That guy can get to the quarterback. I just don't know who that guy is yet for Texas. And their ability to figure that out fast will be one of the question marks early on in the season and how good they can be.
Well, yeah. And then the other thing, Ketch, I mean, to be ignored, but they still have Bryce Young, who is pretty good, and I think he can operate under any offensive line just for the in the college realm. I think Bryce Young is going to be okay. Like, I'm just going to. I don't think he's going to have a deer in the headlights. If just for some reason there's a couple of breakdowns every once in a while, I think he's going to be okay.
How many points do you think will be needed to win that game? I mean, we're ways out, right? We're 2 months away from that game, but
yeah,
almost in middle to late July in your head, 35, 38, 40 plus.
35 was the first number that came to my head. That was the first number when you asked it. It was I said 35, and then you said 35 instantly. So I think 35 is that number. I don't expect, because both teams are still going to want to run the ball. So because I know both teams are still going to want to run the ball, I'm not expecting this to be some 50 to, some crazy super shootout. But I definitely think 35 ends up being like that probably that magical number. What about you?
I keep asking myself, what's the correct over and under for quarterback touchdowns for Bryce Young in that game? And I put the number at 4.5 in my head. So I don't know. I kind of see Bryce with 5 touchdowns. I know that sounds like a lot, but it's kind of what he does.
Yeah.
And until this Texas defense proves me wrong, how many would he have had last year against Texas?
Oh my God.
8? Until they pulled him for the backup?
I mean, how many do you want? I mean, how many did OU have in the second half? I mean, like it's when they did a quarterback change. I mean, again, we're talking about a Heisman Trophy winner, Catch. So think of what Joe Burrow was versus Texas, right?
That's
Heisman
the game
Trophy
that popped into my head.
Yeah, think of that. That's what Heisman Trophy winners do. That's the kind of performance they have.
I think Paul 45 might be a couple of points too high, but 45 is in my head. And I will say that normally whenever you and I do this, what's the point total? It does seem like in the last couple of years, the numbers have skewed lower. So every time we think it's going to take 35, it's a little lower scoring than that. And I think some of that is the Big 12 as a conference has changed a little bit. And that was obviously a topic of conversation at Big 12 Media Days, the way that the style of the league. I could see a young Ewer shootout that isn't dissimilar from what we saw with Ellinger and Burrow. The question is, against that Alabama offense, even if you blink once with a young quarterback, then that 7-point, both teams are still scoring a lot, but suddenly it's a 14-point game every 5 minutes instead of a 7-point game.
Yeah.
And I do worry. I think that could be the kind of game where Ewers throws 3 or 4 touchdowns, but he could also have a couple of picks. And in a world where Bryce Young's maybe throwing 5 touchdowns, that's how you get beat by 21. But I don't know. It's such a hard game. This team was 5-7 5 minutes ago. They haven't proven. The guys are counting on to stop Will Anderson have never had a college practice. I don't know.
Correct. And again, this is one of the Bama people will tell you this is one of the better teams that Nick Saban's had in a long period of time. So it's going to be again, we're talking about a team that had practice versus a team that you just can't knock him like, well, Georgia was better than. I mean, Georgia freaking won the Natty, so let's be clear with that. All right. Let's do this, Catch. Let's do one more with Overweight Lover. And we've got the modcast tomorrow morning. So we're going to have more content. Yeah.
I was just going to keep going. I mean, at this point, I'm on running on delirious. So this is what I'm either at my best. Let me take a hit of the pen. Exactly. We might just be getting started as it turns out.
It could potentially. Well, you take your hit. Last time you took a hit, it 5 or 10 minutes later, I don't know what the hell you were talking about. But Overweight Lover, okay, it wasn't that bad. Overweight Lover asks. By the way, someone said I had a scent of Magic City on me with the fedora. Didn't go to Magic City. Went to my cousin sent me to a place called Cheetahs. By the way, which you can figure out, which. Okay. I think I liked that stuff when I was younger. I think I'm too old for that stuff now. I'm at the point where I was like, the food, the girls are nice, but the food's pretty good. I mean, like that's how old I'm starting to get. Okay. Does Bama take Bijan's cornbread or does he get his?
I think there's a better chance that Ewers has. I think there's a better chance. I could see Bijan doing some damage as a receiver in that game. I think Alabama goes into that game saying Bijan's not going to beat us. We'll make the kid starting his second game at quarterback beat our Heisman winner. And if he can do it, he can do it. So I think Bijan could probably get 100, but it won't be his best 100. I mean, he will really have to work for it because we talk about the pass rush. And the reality is that Texas enters. That's Alabama's strength, man. Defensively, they got dudes. And to think that you're going to line up. Now, it'll be 105 on the field. So, I mean, maybe in the second quarter, Bijan breaks a big one, and that's the play that we remember. But, that happened against Oklahoma last year, too. He started out like gangbusters. And then when they needed Bijan to be able to get yards in the second half and really run that clock and take Oklahoma's offense, who caught fire, and Caleb Williams off of it, They didn't do what they were flashing early in the game. It's hard for me to think that this Texas offensive line ever asserts itself for a long stretch against this Alabama defensive line. You're just hoping not to get anybody killed, I think.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be, for me, it's gonna be tough. For Bijan to get those yards, we're assuming that this is a fairly close game going into the fourth quarter. And when you're within 7-10, something to that effect, and as it's right now, I don't know if I would say that going into the fourth that would be it. I mean, maybe it is, and if it is, they're close for 3 quarters. You've got a good chance of that. But this Bama team is good, man. Like I said, they're good on offense, they're good on defense. They feel pretty good about their special teams as well. So they feel like they're just extremely well-rounded. I think Nick Saban is going to be extremely motivated, against that. Whether it's going against his former, Sarkisian, who used to be on the staff, or all the other guys used to be on the staff, or the guys who transferred to Texas. I think they'll be locked in. They'll be loaded. All those guys. Sometimes you play a non-conference opponent, Catch, and it's just an opponent. There's not a lot of familiarity with it, but there's familiarity with a lot of these Alabama guys because they know these guys from the Texas staff. I was talking to them this week, just a day or two ago, and they're familiar with them. They know Sark and Kyle Flood and Jeff Banks and all that kind of stuff. So with that familiarity becomes, even a little bit more pep in your step, because it's not just, I'm just going against random school. I'm going against these guys who I know, and I want to go ahead and have a good time and maybe punk them a little bit. So
Anwar, this is the schedule. I did this with you before on a Monday Overreaction show.
Yeah.
For those of you who were tuning in tonight on the Drunk Uncle and you haven't seen us do the Monday Overreaction during the season, trust me, it is our most popular show. I mean, at the end of the day, people love the Monday O. In the month of September, this is Alabama's schedule, okay?
Okay.
Utah State at home.
Mm-hmm.
At Texas,
mm-hmm.
La Monroe at home.
Mm-hmm.
Last week of September, Vanderbilt at home. They're legitimately going to put everything on the Texas game. It is.
Yes.
There's nothing for them to overlook, underlook. It is the most important game of this. Unlike in the month of October, you've got at Arkansas, you've got A&M at home, you've got at Tennessee, you've got Mississippi State, then you're LSU at LSU, then you're Mississippi State. You still have you know what I mean? There's a point in the Alabama schedule where you can catch them slipping potentially because they just got a big game every week, and it's hard to be great every week. The thing that worries me a little bit about Texas is there's no distraction from that game, not before or afterwards. And I think that will include the Alabama coaches who everybody keeps asking, what did the Saban saying nice things about Sark mean? To me, it sounded like he's going to get in that ass in September. That's what it sounded like to me.
Mm-hmm.
That way, when he drops, if he's going to try to drop a 70, and when it's over with, he wants everybody to know he respects Sark. But a nice Saban, that's like, he wants blood. And I just think that that's a game on their schedule where if there's a game in September where Saban wants that team to send a message to themselves, it'll be the Alabama-Texas game. On the road, all that heat, 100,000 plus, he'll tell them that's the game that gets them ready in the season, later in the season for these other games.
Mm-hmm.
And it just means that I just don't think you're getting an Alabama that gives you 14 points in the first quarter because they're not focused.
Catch, they were he was talking about how tough of a game that's going to be. And the players were regurgitating that, that's going to be a tough game for us. I don't know how many people come in and say a team that didn't go to a bowl game the following season, that's a tough game, but they're already clearly behind the scenes at Bama, pointing to that week 2 as this is the test. Like, this is going to be the test that gets you guys ready. Future SEC team, Steve Sarkisian. You guys know him. You guys know how smart he is. You guys were on here where he was here. That's going to be a team that's going to come in ready. We got to go to Austin. All the elements. It's hot. Like, they're going to be ready. They will have those guys. Right. They're going to have those guys thinking, we've got to come in here and kick ass, and we got to prove ourselves heading into season. It almost reminds you of the Michael Jordan thing, Catch. Remember from the Last Dance, how Michael would just create these fictional opponents in his head just to motivate himself. They're creating a narrative just to motivate themselves to be ready for week 2.
It's a trademark move of Saban in a year where they don't win the national championship, that he'll have the national championship game playing in the background wherever there are TVs to remind this team that they have to be, they can't let up. You can't have a bad week. You know, the weird thing about the Alabama game for me is that when you look at the Texas schedule, this really doesn't have anything to do with the Alabama game per se. It's just an acknowledgement that UTSA is a weird game to have the week later. Because if you win or you're super competitive, there's got to be a little bit of a drop-off coming out of Alabama. It'd be a very mature thing to push Alabama to the distance, and then the very next week be on your A game at home against a team you should beat that's going to want a piece of you. And then it's a little weird. You've been to Lubbock enough times now. That's just a weird one. Like, whatever you think is ever going to happen in a game in Lubbock, it rarely goes that way, right? Yeah. So say you play Alabama to the finish line but lose. Then you come back the next week and you beat UTSA, but in a tough game, because we all respect, the coaching at UTSA. Big fan of the Drunk Uncle show, by the way. Shout out to the UTSA.
Jeff Traylor came on Just came on a couple of weeks ago. Nice.
But then you follow the Traylor game with Tech on the road, which is nobody ever wants to play that game. That is for everybody that has to go to Lubbock. It's shit, we have to play this game now. Every 2 years you have to make the trip. And every 2 years it's just like, this is a pain in the ass to have to do this. And Tech treats it like that.
Yes. All right. Darwin says, Catch, can you always read the defense fast enough because the receivers will be open?
How the hell should either? There's no way to know. And I'm not going to get carried away with hyperbole, because at this time last year, this exact same coaching staff was really fired up about Hudson Card, and they weren't saying things like, boy, the question that we have with him is, when the bullets start flying, is he going to flinch? They weren't saying that. No. They had no idea. They were blind as bats to what happened in that Arkansas game. Never saw it coming a million miles away. There's no way for us to really know. Because even if the Texas defense is at its best, it's not a nationally elite defense. There's no Will Anderson. Like, there's maybe just a different level of pressure that another school's defense can provide on yours than Texas can. Or he's a future number 1 overall pick in the draft, and he figures it out real fast. There's a vast gulf in between those two things.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, because at the point, I get it. Like, the receivers were open last year, and Hudson, struggled to get the ball there. So I get the question's valid. But to your point, back to the question though, you got to see what happens when the bullets start flying. The practice thing, and this is what Ketch and I kind of preach a little bit. We'll give you practice reports. We'll give you, all the information that's going on, and everyone's going to get hype on training camp and all those kind of things. But we got to tell you that until they play a real opponent, just be careful with the information. Don't sip too much Kool-Aid just because, there's going to be a scrimmage and you hear the offense, the defense looked better than the offense that day. Like, you're going to hear that, but what does that really mean when it's all said and done? Because, Catch, we've talked about this before. You heard about the defensive line beating up the offensive line all of last training camp. And at the end of the day, we realized that both units struggled and both units really weren't that good. So it didn't really mean anything at that point. It's like being the tallest midget.
I had a former Longhorn who's in the NFL go to a practice last year. Left practice, called me up, told me that he thought the defensive tackles were going to be the best defensive tackle rotation that the Longhorns had since Casey Hampton and Shawn Rogers. Didn't say they were going to be as good as those dudes. He thought they would be the best going that far back. What did he do? He watched, and he might be watching right now.
I think I know you're talking about now.
But he did what we did sometimes that we warn against now, which is, sometimes your eyes in person can see something once, and that's your experience, and that's how confirmation bias kicks in. It's the thing that your brain tells you it knows. And I think that's the thing that we got to be careful about, is that even in a one practice setting or in a 1 week setting, or practices are the practices and the games are the games, and no matter what you hear us say in any practice, careful. 5 and 7 a year ago, steps along the way towards whatever this season is going to be. Rome wasn't built in a day, whatever cliches you want to use, but careful. Don't do that thing either where we just say, hey, the offense was better than the defense per our sources, or the other way around, right? Defense was better than the offense. Oh, they're going to suck. Ketch said they're going to suck. Anwar said they were going to. No. Correct. There's an ebb and flow in the fall, and one day one side of the ball wins and the other side, nobody overreact to anything they hear in August. That's all we're saying.
Okay. Real quick, and then Catch, let's do this, and then let's do close up, because I do have a kid who probably is hungry. I think he might need some dinner. So,
Same.
Yeah, okay. So, real quick, who's blocking for Quinn in the Bama game, and as we go into parting shots?
I mean, left or right in the Alabama game.
It's going to be the same.
Kelvin Banks at left tackle.
Yeah.
Junior Angalau at left guard.
Yeah.
Majors at center. I think that the right side of the line is where the questions are. I am thinking Hayden Connor at right guard at this point and Christian Jones at right tackle. They're way higher on Jones. They don't like him at left tackle automatically, but it's kind of started a lot of football. If you're putting true freshmen into that game at the expense of either of those two guys, gutsy.
It would tell us, if there's a guy who's probably borderline, it's probably, Christian Jones at that point, to see what happens. Like, he's probably the guy that's going to have a really good training camp in order to go that way. All right, let's go into parting shots. Catch, just real quick, because I know we got the modcast tomorrow. At what time? 11 o'clock Central Time?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, so 11 o'clock Central Time, the modcast entire staff will be back there. I didn't ask, but subscribe, and also share it. Stop fighting on your Facebook stuff about political things, man. They don't care. I'm gonna tell you a real quick thing. If you are a Republican and you share it trying to convince your Democratic friends, they don't care. And if you're a Democrat trying to post stuff to convince your Republican friends, they don't care. No one's changing each other's mind. So post this stuff, post the Longhorn stuff, and you guys will have some common ground, a common bond. Stop arguing on your Facebook pages. Let it be your safe haven. Catch. It's so Catch. It just gets on my nerves when I see people just posting these things and they're arguing, folks. Like, You are not changing anyone's opinion at this moment. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Just go ahead and post some good stuff. Say like, hey, Malik Muhammad, SEC, great video. Check this out, guys. Let me know what you think. You'll have much more positive experience on your social media, your friends, all the interactions, all that kind of stuff, as opposed to just trying to argue, Trump versus Biden. Each person thinks how they think. What the hell we arguing over? But we're not going to argue over this. Not the drunk uncle. Not Ketch and Anwar. Not going to argue over that. You like that. So let's just do that. All right, Ketch, party shots.
I was real quickly, just had two quick things. Okay. One was just to finish what we were talking about.
All right.
I'm really curious and it's just to answer or to not even answer. It's to make overweight lovers' question even more potentially confusing to answer. I wonder how they rank 1 through 5 their offensive linemen. I wonder where Jake Majors, because what we know of Kyle Flood is that he wants a big old fat, big giant monster everywhere on that line. Yeah. The bigger, the taller, the more over 325 they are, the better, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jake's a little bit of an undersized dude and is always going to be that guy. And I wonder what 1 through 5 looks like, because I feel like Hayden Conner might be ahead of Jake Majors on the pecking order of, if we got to find ways to get dudes on the field, who are they? And what the wild card of the discussion is, we don't know what any of these true freshmen do to that 1 through 5 order. Mm-hmm. But whereas I love Jake Majors, and I hope that dude has a sensational – he's an Orange Bloods athlete, right? Like, we love Jake. Yeah. It is impossible not to look at what we know of Flood's preferences, the way he's trying to build this line. I think this is a UT football coaching staff that is by any means necessary. Let's get to where we need to get to. Just something to think about and keep an eye on. The other thing I was just going to say from a parting shot standpoint, I'll end where we started. Malik Muhammad to Texas. If you just join the video and you're like, why aren't these guys talking about Malik Muhammad? Well, we started like an hour and 45 minutes ago. So we did for an hour, we did Malik Muhammad, and then we moved on. So you could just go back and look a little bit later on. Big old long hour on it, including 20 minutes of build up before he actually committed. He is a difference maker of the elite variety. He is the type of guy that I constantly stress, this tier of recruit matters. And I said it at the beginning. You're talking about a guy that his positioning with his position, so top 5 prospect who's a DB with his skill set, those guys make it to the NFL at a 5-star plus rate. I mean, he's a guy that if he doesn't make it to the NFL, you'll look back and say, oh, well, there was the injury or there was this one kind of crazy thing that happened, but it wouldn't ever be anything that you could forecast in the future, because this talent and his ability on a football field are that good. I just think everybody should be this is a different level of commitment than most of the defensive commitments that the Longhorns have had. So if you want to throw a party tonight and celebrate because of a big recruiting win, this is exactly the type of kid that justifies such a moment.
Perfect. My party shot is this. Stay tuned to orangebloods.com. Stay tuned to this Texas Longhorn football channel. We are giving you content after content, daily content, reporting from Arlington, reporting from Atlanta. I mean, we've got Recruit Cast going on. We've got Catch a Show on a Tuesday night. We've got Overreaction Mondays. We've got obviously the Drunk Uncle on Wednesday nights. We've got Modcasts on Thursdays. We got shows on Fridays that, on Friday, you'll get a behind the scenes look at SEC Media Days, right? And everything that Blake is putting all the stuff together, all the videos that I took that's there. We'll have many things in the season as far as, even post-game shows that we've had. So there's a lot of guys, there's enough reasons for you to click like and subscribe. We're giving you content among content among content. Just being relentless, making sure that you guys have a hub, a place to go consistently for good Longhorn football talk. So I just want to let you know that please stay tuned. We appreciate your support. I know Ketch appreciates it. I appreciate it. Everyone else associated with this appreciates it. So thank you for supporting us. And stay tuned because we've got a lot of stuff coming, especially in the season. Ketch and I, when we do our overreaction, we overreact to Sarkisian and what he says on Mondays. Again, we got shows all throughout the week. There's just a ton of reasons to stick with us and stay with us. So thank you for your support, but also know that we've got more great things coming. We got some special surprises for you also coming up this season. So get ready for that. So for Geoff Ketchum, my main man, this is your main man, Anwar Richardson. We got Uncle Phil, Drunk Unc. We got to now feed these kids to make sure that, that they're taken care of. And of course, there's the countdown to school that's going on that none of these kids want to talk about. But Ketch and I are starting to do our countdowns because it's coming up soon, and we're ready to put these little bastards back in school. Let our property taxes take care of.
Your car's not even going to stop on that first school day, is it?
Never. My car, the first school day, I bring it to a slow roll and push him out. And just
your problem now.
It's a slow roll, baby. Get on out. Go to school. Daddy's property taxes are paying for this. But for Geoff Ketchum, it's Anwar Richardson. Thanks for watching it to the Drunk Uncle, your Drunk Uncle Sports Podcast. Free Moro Jomi, your guys are correct. We'll see you soon. See you next week. See ya. Peace.